Kate wasn't naive. She knew how her father operated. He wouldn't wait for ICE to do its job. He would accelerate the process. He had connections. He could make this disappear before anyone even knew it was happening. She had to act first. Her hands shook as she dialed the only person she knew who could help. Lisa, I need you. Lisa Monroe had been her best friend since childhood. But more importantly, Lisa's father was one of the best immigration lawyers in the state. Lisa's voice was groggy when she answered. Kate? It's 7 in the morning. I don't care. Kate's voice was sharp, desperate. Jamal is being deported in 2 days. There was a long pause. Then Lisa sighed. I'm on my way. By the time Lisa arrived, Kate had already dug through every legal website she could find, looking for anything, any loophole, any law that could keep Jamal in the country. But none of it made sense. None of it felt like enough. Lisa sat across from her, rubbing her temples. Kate, this isn't going to be easy. I know that. Lisa sighed. Does he have any family here? Any asylum claims? Anything that would make a judge reconsider? Kate swallowed hard. No, nothing. Lisa leaned back. Then your only option is to go public. Kate blinked. What? Lisa's expression was serious. Your father thrives on silence, on power behind closed doors. You need to make this loud. You need to make sure people are watching. He can't make Jamal disappear if the whole world is looking. Kate's heart pounded. She had spent her whole life in her father's shadow, obeying the rules of the world he had built. But this was war. And if war was what it took, she was ready. Jamal watched Kate pace the hospital room, phone in hand, typing furiously. He had never seen her like this. Determined, fierce, completely unshaken. What are you doing? He asked. She didn't look up. Making sure they can't take you without a fight. He exhaled. Kate. No. She finally stopped, turning to him. You don't get to tell me to stop. Not this time. Something flickered in his gaze. A mix of frustration, gratitude, and something deeper. He should tell her to let this go. He should make her leave before she got herself tangled in something she couldn't undo. But he didn't, because deep down, a part of him wanted to believe she could actually save him. That for once, he wasn't fighting alone. And maybe, just maybe, love was worth the risk. Some people run toward something, others run away. But when the walls start closing in, when there's nowhere left to go, you learn the difference between escaping and surviving. Jamal wasn't sure which one he was doing anymore. For years, he had moved through this world like a ghost, always looking over his shoulder, always prepared to disappear at the first sign of trouble. It was the only way to survive. But now, there was no running, no disappearing. The storm had found him, and this time, it wasn't letting him go. Kate had started a fire she couldn't put out. Within hours, the news had spread. Social media was exploding with the story of the undocumented immigrant who had saved a senator's daughter. Some people called him a hero. Others called him a criminal. And in the middle of it all, the one man with the power to decide his fate sat behind a desk, watching it unfold. Senator Richard Williams had built his career on control. He had spent decades shaping the world to fit his vision. But now, his own daughter was defying him, turning the narrative against him. And Richard Williams did not lose. The knock on the hospital door was sharp, precise, final. Jamal knew before he even looked who it was. Senator Williams stepped inside, his presence swallowing the room. He didn't look at his daughter. His cold blue eyes were locked onto Jamal. You have no idea what you've done. Kate stood between them before Jamal could speak. No, Dad. You have no idea what you've done. The senator exhaled slowly, his expression unreadable. I expected this kind of recklessness from you, Catherine. But dragging this situation into the public eye? Do you understand what you just started? Kate didn't flinch. The truth. I started the truth. A sharp laugh. The truth. He looked at Jamal now, as if evaluating him, weighing his worth. The truth is, I could have fixed this. Quietly. But now it's a disaster. Jamal sat up slowly, his body aching. A disaster for who? You or me? The senator's eyes flashed. I could make this all go away, you know. With a single call, I could have you on a plane by morning. Kate crossed her arms. Try it. See what happens. The tension in the room thickened. Jamal had spent his whole life avoiding men like this. Men who saw people like him as obstacles, as statistics, as problems to be removed. But today, he wasn't hiding. Today, he was standing his ground. You don't scare me, Jamal said quietly. The senator smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Then you're a fool. Kate turned to Jamal. We're filing an appeal. Lisa's dad is helping. We still have time. The senator's expression darkened. And you really think that will save him? It will if you stay out of the way. She shot back. A long silence stretched between them. Then the senator shook his head, disappointment flickering in his eyes. You think you're fighting for something noble, Catherine, but you're just delaying the inevitable. He turned to Jamal one last time, his voice steady. I suggest you prepare yourself, because the world isn't going to save you. Then he was gone. Jamal leaned back against the pillows, exhaling slowly. That went well. Kate let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. He's scared. Jamal glanced at her. No, he's angry. She met his gaze, determination burning behind her eyes. Then we fight harder. Jamal wanted to believe her, wanted to believe that this wasn't a war he had already lost. But he had seen too much, lived too much, to think the world suddenly played fair. Kate had started a fight, but the question was, could they win it? Some choices change the course of a life. Others change the course of history. And sometimes a single choice decides the difference between love and loss. Jamal had spent his entire life making choices to survive, to stay invisible, to stay safe. But today, survival wasn't enough. Today, he had to fight. The appeal had been filed. The media storm had grown. News stations debated whether he was a hero or a criminal. Protesters gathered outside the courthouse, chanting his name, some in support, some demanding deportation. Jamal Okoye was no longer invisible, and that terrified him. Kate sat beside him in the waiting room of the immigration office, her fingers gripping his hand tightly. He could feel her pulse racing. She was trying to stay calm, but he knew she was scared. So was he. They have to listen, she whispered, more to herself than to him. The judge has to see that this is wrong. Jamal didn't answer. He had seen men like the judge before, men who looked at people like him and only saw a problem to be erased, a name on a file, a case to be closed. The door opened and an officer stepped out. Okoye? Jamal exhaled slowly and stood. This was it. The courtroom was colder than he expected. Sterile, impersonal, a place where lives were decided with the stroke of a pen. The judge peered down at him from behind thick-rimmed glasses. He was an older man, his face unreadable. To his right, the government attorney shuffled through a stack of papers. To his left, Lisa's father sat, his suit crisp, his expression calm but calculating. Kate sat behind Jamal, her presence like a steady flame. No matter what happened, she was here. She wasn't going to let him go through this alone. Mr. Okoye, the judge began, his voice low but firm. You are here today because of your unlawful entry into the United States. Do you understand the charges against you? Jamal nodded. Yes, Your Honor. The government attorney stood. Your Honor, the law is clear. Mr. Okoye has been living in this country illegally, regardless of any recent events. He has no legal basis to remain here. Lisa's father stood next. With all due respect, Your Honor, Mr. Okoye risked his life to save an American citizen. He has no criminal record. He has worked tirelessly, despite the odds against him. If that does not represent the values this country was built upon, then I don't know what does. The judge's gaze flickered toward Jamal. "Do you have anything to say, Mr. Okoye?" Jamal swallowed hard. He had never been good with words. He had spent his life moving in silence, letting the world pass him by. But now he had to speak. He took a deep breath. "I didn't come here to break the law. I didn't come here to take from anyone. I came because I wanted a future, a real one." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I have worked. I have fought. I have given everything to a country that never even knew I existed. And when I saw someone in danger, I didn't stop to think about my papers. I didn't think about the consequences. I did what I knew was right." A heavy silence filled the room. Kate held her breath. The judge's expression remained unreadable. "This is not an easy case," he finally said. "Heroism is not a legal status." But Kate's grip on the bench tightened. "But justice is not just about laws. It is about fairness. It is about what is right." Jamal's heartbeat pounded in his ears. "I will need time to make my decision." The judge's gavel struck the wood. Court adjourned. Jamal exhaled sharply. It wasn't a win, but it wasn't a loss. And for now, that was enough. There comes a moment when running is no longer an option, when hiding is no longer a choice, when a man must decide if he's willing to fight, even if it costs him everything. Jamal had spent his whole life in the shadows, moving quietly, staying unnoticed. But today, the world was watching. Today, the decision that could change his life was no longer in his hands. The courthouse steps were lined with reporters, cameras flashing, microphones ready. Protesters on both sides filled the streets, some holding signs that read, "Let him stay," others demanding deport illegals now. America had already decided what it thought of him. Now, it was up to one man in a robe to decide his fate. Kate was beside him, her hand wrapped around his, refusing to let go. She was his anchor, his constant, his reminder that he wasn't fighting alone. The doors opened and Lisa's father stepped out, his face unreadable. The weight in Jamal's chest grew heavier. "The judge has made his decision," Lisa's father said. "It's time." Inside the courtroom, everything felt smaller. The walls closed in. The air was thick, suffocating. Jamal stood before the judge, his heart pounding so loudly he could barely hear anything else. The judge cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses. "Mr. Okoye, after reviewing the case, I have come to a decision regarding your immigration status." The room was silent. The world held its breath. "I will not pretend that the law is not clear. Unlawful entry into this country is a violation of immigration policy." Jamal's stomach twisted. However, Kate stiffened beside him. The judge continued, "The law is also meant to serve justice. And in this case, justice is not simply about punishment. It is about what is right. You have demonstrated bravery, integrity, and a willingness to contribute to this country. Therefore, time slowed. I am granting you a temporary stay while a pathway to legal residency is pursued." For a moment, Jamal couldn't breathe. He had spent years preparing for the worst, for rejection, for loss. But this was something he had never dared to hope for. A second chance. Kate let out a breath she had been holding. Her grip on his hand tightened. He turned to her, and for the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to feel something he had buried deep inside. Relief. The judge's gavel struck the wood. Court dismissed. It was over. He wasn't free yet, but he wasn't lost either. And for the first time in his life, Jamal Okoye had a future worth fighting for. Some fights are won with fists, others with words. But the most important battles are fought with the heart. Jamal had never been the kind of man to believe in miracles. He had lived too much, seen too much, to think the world suddenly changed for men like him. But today was different. The courtroom had emptied, the echoes of the judge's decision still ringing in his ears. Temporary stay, a chance, a future. For the first time in years, Jamal felt something unfamiliar. Hope. Kate turned to him, her blue eyes searching his face. "You did it," Jamal exhaled, shaking his head. "No, Kate, we did." She smiled, and for a brief moment, the weight of the past didn't matter. The struggle, the fear, the night spent wondering if he would make it another day. All of it had led to this moment. He had spent his life surviving. But now, he had a chance to live. The world didn't change overnight. The fight wasn't over. But something was different now. Jamal had a name, a story, a voice that people listened to. He was no longer invisible. And neither was Kate. Her father had tried to control the outcome, but in the end, he had lost. The senator's power was not enough to erase what had happened. And though he never admitted it out loud, Kate saw the shift in him. The realization that the world was changing whether he wanted it to or not. Lisa's father worked on Jamal's case, ensuring that his residency application moved forward. It would take time. There would be more battles ahead. But Jamal was no longer fighting alone. This time, Kate was there, and she wasn't going anywhere.
If you like this video, please hit the like button, share, and subscribe.